A mother of three murdered at work.
And I saw Kim laying there. That broke my heart.
It was a grisly scene.
Her bra had been cut off. There was a bite mark on her left breast.
Could a man who kissed her under the mistletoe be a killer?
You did get quite angry at investigators.
Absolutely.
He was convicted and sentenced to death.
That's a whole ton of bricks just fell on you.
But was it a wrong impression that made him look guilty?
He took a look at Ray's teeth and he said, "This is nonsense."
A dead man walking, fighting the system and the odds.
When you're sentenced to death, you make peace with dying.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Phoenix, Arizona, where a single mother of three seemed to have her life back on track after a divorce. She was working nights at a popular bar. Then shortly after closing one night, something went terribly and tragically wrong. Early in the morning of December 29th, 1991, as the sun rose over downtown Phoenix, the owner of the CBS Lounge approached his bar's front door and noticed something unusual.
The door was open. Well, the door shouldn't be open. I said, something's wrong here. I figured I'd been robbed.
He quickly examined the cash register and safe. Everything seemed to be okay.
There was no money missing. Nothing was amiss.
Until he tried to open the bathroom door.
I went to the men's room. I pushed it, and as I pushed it, then I saw Kim laying there.
Phoenix police arrived and pronounced 36-year-old Kim Ancona dead at the scene. Not far from her body, detectives discovered a knife at the bottom of the bathroom's trash can.
Her bra had been cut off, her panties had been cut. There was a bite mark on her left breast. It showed a good deal of violence.
Investigators noticed the impression left by the attacker's teeth had an unusual pattern.
The bite mark was probably one of the more dramatic things because it was so obvious and so plain.
A bite mark expert was called in to do an analysis.
They did bring in a forensic odontologist, and he made impressions and so forth with regard to her breast.
When news of Kim's death got out, friends and co-workers were in a state of shock.
It's heartbreaking. It broke my heart.
I'd known her for about 12, 15 years. It was just devastating, it really was.
When it came time to contribute to her funeral, there was an outpouring.
As the investigation continued, police got an anonymous tip, a note that said, "You're looking for an Indian. I seen him hanging around the back of CBS about 3:30. Get him, please." The note described a man with black hair, roughly 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. But investigators already had a lead on another man, someone who was said to be dating Kim and was supposed to have helped her close the bar that night. His name was Ray.
You could tell they were a couple. You know, they'd hold hands or, kiss here or there. I heard that he kind of got angry with her at the bar about a week and a half, 2 weeks before this happened.
Detectives carefully went through Kim's address book and found the name Ray Crone, a former Air Force sergeant who went on to work for the U.S. Postal Service. He had never been in trouble with the law, but despite a spotless record, police went to Crone's house to ask him about Kim Ancona.
What did you tell police when they asked you if you knew Kim Ancona?
I said, no, I don't think I know anybody named Kim Ancona.
He had told the detective he didn't know her, and according to the detective, he wasn't particularly cooperative, and that caused the detective to be suspicious.
Detectives were surprised Crone denied even knowing the victim.
He said, "You don't know Kim and Kona from the CBS Lounge." I said, "Well, wait a minute, I play volleyball for the CBS Lounge. There's a girl that works there named Kim." I said, "I don't know her last name." And again, they looked dumbfounded at each other and back at me. "Well, you don't know her last name? You're her boyfriend, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm not her boyfriend. What's this about?"
Crone insisted he never dated Kim, but detectives were hearing a different story. Someone had told investigators that you had driven her from the bar one night to a friend's house. Did that happen?
That actually did happen. I mean, again, it's I could see where they thought, "Oh, he's hiding something." All she did was get in my car, and we drove about 4 blocks, maybe a quarter mile, to that house. And then when it was a Christmas party, they had mistletoe hanging. We did kiss under the mistletoe once or twice. He says, "Well, don't you think that's a date?" I said, "My God, if that's dating, giving her a ride a half a mile," I said, "then, you know, I dated half the women in Phoenix."
Investigators believe Crone was lying about how well he knew Kim. But there was something else about him that was even more suspicious: his teeth.
The teeth protruded out. He had had an auto accident a few years before that caused this odd protrusion of his teeth, and they were protruded rather peculiarly, you know, very obviously.
Investigators decided to check Crone's teeth against the bite mark on the victim's breast.
At one point, he even had me bite in a piece of styrofoam.
Did you ask them why?
I did, and I'm starting to get a little worried.
The styrofoam impression was compared with the bite mark. The forensic dentist said Crone's teeth were consistent with the bite mark, but further testing was needed to be certain.
They actually brought me back down to the police station again and took a blood sample, a hair sample, and had a dentist there and took casts of my teeth and spent over 2 hours in a dentist chair with taking these casts, had my mouth opened up with plastic utensils, taking pictures, having me snarl and grin and move my chin around.
You did get quite angry at investigators after samples of your mouth were taken, and...
I definitely got angry after that part, yes. Absolutely.
How mad?
I got mad enough to yell at him.
There had to be a part of you that understood. The more unglued you became, the more suspicious your actions would look.
Not true. I certainly had nothing to hide.
Investigators were becoming convinced Crone was their man.
Mr. Crone turned out to be, as far as the detectives were concerned, the only realistic suspect. No one else with teeth that could even come. I mean, there was nobody else.
But they still had to wait for the bite mark analysis to come back from the lab. Would Ray Crone's unusual teeth be a match? With lightning speed, investigators had built a case against their lead suspect, Ray Crone. The forensic dentist was comparing Crone's teeth to the bite marks found on the victim. Detectives were about to get the results.
The analysis of the bite mark came back that the teeth marks of Ray Crone corresponded very, very closely. In effect, the bite mark on the foam compared to the bite mark on Kim Ancona's left breast was essentially identical.
The forensic dentist concluded Crone's teeth were a match. If he was right, detectives had found Kim Ancona's killer. What evidence did investigators have against you?
One of the things they inferred to was about me denying, knowing her. And the other one was the bite mark. They said my teeth were crooked. The marks were found on the body that matched my teeth.
Just 2 days after Kim's death, Crone was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault.
It appeared to be a very strong case against Ray Crone.
On July 29, 1992, Ray Crone's trial began. At the beginning of your trial, how concerned were you?
I was sure that there was nothing going to happen because I didn't do anything. I was never a bad person. I have no background, no reason to do that. And certainly there's other reasonable people in that courtroom should have seen that.
prosecutors called to the stand their bite mark expert, who presented a video to the jurors. By using CAT scan technology and reverse image overlays, he demonstrated that when Ray's teeth were superimposed over the victim's wound, it was a match.
The video was a very clear presentation. If you watch football on TV, you can see the play so much better because they zoom right in. It's the same thing the way he did it with the video. I mean, you really got a view.
When prosecutors said that your bite matched that on the victim, how did you explain that away in court?
I was stunned and shocked. It's like, how did they do this? How can this possibly be?
The prosecution had more than just the bite mark evidence on its side. Investigators also took the stand and testified that Ray's shoes were approximately the same size as the footprints found near the body at the crime scene. And that wasn't all. A Phoenix crime lab technician testified that both the blood and the hairs found at the crime scene were consistent with the victim and Ray Crone. Then Kim's co-worker took the stand as a witness for the prosecution and testified that there had been an altercation between Ray and Kim at the bar. One witness testified at your trial that you were recently seen arguing with Kim. What was your response to that testimony?
This is one of the issues people say, you raise your voice, always yelling at her. I remember there was one point when it was like a happy hour or something. I think there was something to do with the pitcher price or something, and it was charged the full price when it was supposed to be half hour price. But there was never no alleged, yelling, arguing, fighting.
Kim's co-worker also testified that Ray was lying when he told detectives he was not dating Kim Ancona.
The times I saw them together, it was obvious they were a couple.
Why did so many witnesses tell the prosecution? Not only did you know Kim, but you dated her.
If you loved or cared about a person that was just a murder victim and you wanted to cooperate and the police were telling you this is the person that did it, we need help. People were volunteering a lot of information that may or may not have been true, but they're thinking they're helping out because the police told them this is the person that did it.
After presenting all the evidence, the prosecution rested. I find it hard to believe that you sat in that courtroom and you're watching the prosecution show this convincing bite mark match. You're hearing witness after witness saying, I don't know why he would lie to you and say he didn't know who she was. Wasn't there any part of you that was a little bit worried?
The prosecution gets the first crack and then the defense is supposed to get the second. I was still waiting for my crack.
Ray Crone decided to testify in his own defense. But by taking the stand, he opened himself up to cross-examination. And when the prosecutor got his chance, he drilled Crone with questions, starting with his whereabouts the night of the murder. What was your alibi?
I was home in bed asleep. I had a roommate that was staying in my house at the time, and he knows I was home in bed that night.
But the prosecutor argued that Ray could have snuck out of the house unnoticed and committed the murder while his roommate was asleep. The prosecutor then zeroed in on the key piece of evidence against Crone.
I remember specifically asking him, I says, well, Mr. Crone, my bite mark experts say that these are your teeth that did these bite marks on Kim Ancona's breast. And he just looks back and says, that's what your experts say.
I had no defense for a bite mark expert. My attorney put no defense on really whatsoever for that.
But Crone still hoped his appearance as a witness would win over the jurors and convince them that he was telling the truth when he said he never dated Kim Ancona, that his teeth did not make the bite marks on the victim, and that he did not commit the murder.
Certainly, I mean, it seems like you have a right as a defendant to take the stand. You want people to hear your side of it.
What do you think was the most compelling evidence against you?
Clearly, it had to be the bite mark evidence. That was really the only thing that scientifically wise, supposedly time it took. The bite mark evidence was the main thrust of the whole trial.
After 8 days of testimony, Ray Crone's fate was now in the hands of the jurors. After 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was in. Would Ray Crone emerge from the courtroom a free man? Or would he face a life behind bars, or even the death penalty?
jury came back. The verdict was guilty of first-degree murder.
Ray Crone was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Kim Ancona. What was your reaction to the verdict?
Well, then the whole world changed. Then it's a whole ton of bricks just fell on you.
On November 20th, 1992, the judge sentenced Ray Crone to death. Describe your life on death row.
It's existence. I mean, you're in a cell the size of most people's bathroom.
Were you afraid to die?
You know what? When you're sentenced to death, you make peace with dying. Dying's not the hard thing. It's living was the hard thing. Kill me, do me a favor, because it's got to be better than living like this. No, dying wasn't hard. Dying was the easy thing. Dying got you out of that pain, got you out of that suffering. I wasn't afraid of dying.
800 miles away from that tiny prison cell on death row, a young man who had never even met Ray Crone learned about his case from his mother.
Out of the blue, she just said, you have a cousin on death row, and, you know, I never met Ray. She just told me about the case, that he was on death row in Arizona.
You had the predisposition of believing that he was guilty.
I thought he was probably guilty. He's convicted by a jury. You know, I didn't know anything about him. Why would I have reason to believe he was innocent?
But Jim Ricks was curious about the cousin he had never met, and he decided to write him a letter. Your life took a dramatic turn when you received a letter from a long-lost cousin. What did that letter say?
He was stunned, you know, startled about a family member being in prison, and just asked me what had happened, tell me about it. And I think I wrote about a 3 or 4 page letter back to him. I said, look, I know you don't know me, but what I said is the truth. If you ever want to look into it, you can see for yourself.
Something about Crone's letter struck Jim. And although he has no legal background, he sells computer software, Jim decided to dig deeper into the case. When you told people outside your family that you were going to try to investigate this Ray Crone case, did they think you were crazy?
Oh, yeah. I bounced it off my friend. He said, oh, you got to be careful. These guys are very clever. These guys can, you know, tell you just what you want to hear and get you on their side. And so I said, well, what's the next step? And he said, well, you should read the transcripts.
Jim tracked down the trial transcripts and pored over them, page by page. At this stage of the process, you were still convinced that Ray was guilty.
Yes. I just kind of got curious if he's guilty, what made him guilty? And the evidence they had was this bite mark. And so I decided to take a look at that, take a look at the evidence myself. And I'll tell you, when I saw that videotape, I was as convinced as the jury.
It's devastating.
It's devastating when you look at it, sure.
It looked like Crone was indeed a guilty man. But Jim couldn't let go. He wanted the opinion of a professional with no stake in the case. So he found a board-certified forensic bite mark expert and asked him to evaluate the evidence. And what did he say?
He took a look at Ray's teeth, and, you know, in 30 seconds, he knew what he was looking for. In 30 seconds, he said, this is nonsense.
Even at first glance, the expert felt fairly certain Crone's teeth could not have caused the bite mark on the victim's breast. But more tests would be needed to confirm that first impression. The more Jim learned, the more he wanted to do something about Crone's situation. He decided to visit his cousin, whom he had never met.
I got a notice that there was Mr. Jim Ricks there to visit me on death row. The first I'd ever met him was right there on death row.
What did he say to you that day?
He said, I'm going to do what I can. And on those days when life seems like, oh, nobody believes me, here was this pick-me-up, here was this guardian coming to say, I want to help.
It's so interesting to me that Ray was a cousin you had never met. You heard that he's a murderer. You're fascinated by the case. You think he's guilty going into your own investigation. What kept you so engaged?
It just kind of gradually got under my skin. And when I came to believe he was innocent, I had tremendous, empathy for him. It was like I was living in prison with him.
When the bite mark expert confirmed his initial finding that Ray Crone couldn't have been responsible for the wound on Kim Ancona, it fortified Jim's commitment to his cousin. But he knew he would need a lot of help. So he contacted a lawyer and shared with him everything he'd learned about the case. I was convinced that he was innocent based on kind of a review of all the evidence. I just was, you know, smitten by the case where I just could not let it go. It was almost, you know, kind of like if a doctor saw somebody on the side of the road that was injured, how do you not help a person like that if you're a doctor? And I was a lawyer, and Ray needed help. Ray Crone had a new team in his corner, and its first objective was to request a new trial.
At the point that you hired this new attorney, were you fairly confident you could get a new trial for Ray?
I thought it was going to be a slam dunk.
But this was just the start of what would become a long and difficult battle. Coming up, will new evidence mean a second chance for Ray Crone? I began to seriously worry they were not going in the right direction. Ray Crone had a new team working on his defense. They were convinced of his innocence and had filed an appeal with the Supreme Court of Arizona. If it was successful, Crone could get a new trial. On June 22nd, 1995, almost 3 years after he was sentenced to death, the Supreme Court of Arizona overturned Ray Crone's conviction. He would get a new trial. The ruling was based on a technicality concerning the most important piece of evidence the prosecution had presented, the bite mark video. Ray received a new trial because the prosecutor in the first trial did not provide his defense attorney in a timely manner with a videotape. When did you find out you were getting a second trial?
I actually first read about it in the newspaper. And they brought the mail around, there was the newspaper, and I opened up the newspaper, and on the bottom fold it said, death penalty conviction overturns. I started reading a little farther, and there was my name, Ray Crone, and I left there, yelled out to everybody. I said, hey, and a couple other people got newspapers. The next thing, everybody's cheering and yelling and rooting for me.
That must have been so surreal.
It was. I mean, again, a lot of the guys live vicariously through other people in there. You know, if something good happens to one death row person, it feels good for all.
On February 12, 1996, Ray Crone stood trial for the murder of Kim Ancona for a second time. As spectators crammed into the courtroom, the man assigned to escort Ray Crone to court was on high alert. He believed he was guarding a monster.
When I was first told that I was going to be assigned to Ray Crone's case, the officer who had done his first trial told me emphatically that he was extremely dangerous, and I had to be very careful. He was a vicious killer, and that I had to be on my toes at all times.
The prosecution was confident the new trial would end the same way as the first, with Ray Crone being found guilty of murder.
The evidence was still plenty strong enough. Essentially, nothing changed in the bite mark, and no other suspects came forward.
The media referred to Ray Crone as the snaggletooth killer. The prosecution was ready to exploit the headlines by making the bite mark the centerpiece of its case once again, arguing that Crone's protruding front tooth was a match to the victim's wound. But this time, the defense was ready. It's just not accurate. It's just like seeing something on TV, kind of the CSI, where they give you all the bells and whistles and it looks very slick and so forth. But the details were very hard to discern, and if you didn't look at it with a critical eye, you didn't realize that it was really erroneous. To challenge the bite mark evidence, the defense brought in 3 nationally recognized experts. They all testified that Ray's teeth were not a match.
This is a very poor bite mark case. This one bite mark on the victim just didn't match his teeth at all. The lower teeth, the upper teeth, nothing fit.
Dr. Skip Sperber says to make a positive ID based from a bite mark, all of the teeth must line up precisely. He told the jury that the evidence against Ray Crone did not even come close to meeting that standard. Dr. Sperber testified that the evidence clearly showed spaces between the bottom teeth marks on the victim, but there were no spaces between Ray Crone's bottom teeth.
So what does that mean? It means that someone else did the biting, not Ray Crone. It's just that simple.
The defense challenged other pieces of evidence used to convict Crone. In the first trial, detectives testified that Crone's shoes fit the footprints found next to the victim. Now, the defense showed that the killer's footprints were at least a full size smaller than Crone's. Crone's cousin Jim Ricks believed the defense team was shredding the prosecution's case.
And the evidence wasn't fitting Ray. I mean, the footprints didn't fit Ray.
Not anywhere close to the size of Ray's feet.
Not anywhere close to the size of Ray's feet. I mean, it wasn't the same brand of shoe that he wore besides that.
And that wasn't all. At the first trial, there was testimony by prosecution witnesses that hair found at the crime scene was similar to Crone's. But this time, the defense did its own tests, and it discovered something far different.
You know, when we finally did get the evidence, we sent it to the FBI, and they said, no, these belong to an American Indian.
Remember early on in the investigation, detectives received an anonymous note saying, "You're looking for an Indian? I seen him?" Now that note seemed more important than ever. In addition to refuting the prosecution's case point by point, the defense also presented new DNA tests.
There was blood that was found on the victim's clothing, her underwear and her pants, that didn't belong to Mr. Crone and did not belong to the victim. So essentially there was unknown DNA, presumably from the perpetrator.
The defense believed this was its most compelling piece of evidence. But the explanation of the DNA testing in court was complex and very hard to follow.
At that time in 1996, DNA wasn't that well understood, and to listen to a scientist or a person, you know, spouting these numbers and these acronyms and everything else, it was some boring testimony, believe me.
Despite that, Crone and his lawyers felt confident.
The truth was coming out. The pictures showed footprints where the knife was taken from, same footprints around the body that could not possibly have matched my feet. Hair that didn't match me. The DNA did not match me. Finally, the truth's coming out. We had every reason to be faithful and confident that now, finally, the jury would see the truth and I'd be going home.
For the second time in 3 years, Ray Crone's fate was now in the hands of a jury.
Every piece of evidence that had been presented during the trial was brought into the jury room.
As the jury deliberated, Ray's cousin Jim Ricks felt that all the time and effort spent to help his cousin was about to pay off.
I just thought it was, we're going to have a festive occasion. I'm sitting there waiting for it to happen. I could not see how he would be convicted a second time.
But behind closed doors, the jurors were having a tough time coming to a decision.
When the jury met and took their first vote, the vote was actually 8-4. It was not unanimous.
The jurors did their own analysis of the evidence, and once again, it all centered on Ray Crone's teeth.
The discussion that evolved around the bite mark itself pretty much went to the mold of the bitten area and the mold of the teeth pattern from Ray Crone.
As the jury deliberations dragged on, Crone's defense team was getting nervous.
After they were out a couple of days, I began to seriously worry and be concerned that they were not going in the right direction.
It took 3 long days of intense debate to reach a verdict. Describe the moment the jury came back into the courtroom after some very long deliberations.
I've always had heard by then that, that you could usually tell by some of the jurors in the face if they're smiling, if they'll look at you, things like that. It's a good sign. And they were crying. Most of them were wiping tears out of their eyes with their heads down. It was quite a somber moment, if you will. It looked like they'd really been through a lot.
When the jury was asked to give its verdict, no one knew what to expect.
The emotional part of the jury with returning to the courtroom, this person's life is in your hands, and you better have been right. All of the jurors came up with a guilty verdict.
For a second time, a jury of his peers declared that Ray Crone was guilty of murder. What were you thinking when the guilty verdict came down?
I was like, whoa, back up, rewind, let's start this over again. It's like, you know, can we hit rewind quick? Because that's really not what they meant. And that's, you know, that's not what's supposed to happen, because we just showed them the truth, or at least reasonable doubt.
Were you shocked?
I was shocked, absolutely. I never saw it. You know, I'd watched the entire trial. The reasonable doubt was just so abundant.
I was devastated. I mean, in fact, Ray had to console me. I mean, really was just shocked.
The jurors had been swayed by the prosecution's snaggletooth argument. They believed that the badly misaligned top front tooth on the bite mark was a perfect match to Ray Crone.
To me, there was beyond a reasonable doubt, there was a match.
You can't get around it. The bite mark was the evidence that convinced them on the second trial that Ray Crone was again guilty.
After the verdict was read, Ray Crone turned to his mother and sister and told them everything would be okay. But as he was handcuffed and taken away, a harsher reality set in. He knew he might be headed back to death row. Coming up,
I'm still a murderer in their eyes. You might as well kill me.
the dramatic conclusion of the Ray Crone story.
He told us that the case would haunt him for the rest of his life.
Want more on the case? Go to investigationdiscovery.com/paulazan and view more exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes video. For a second time, Ray Crone was pronounced guilty of murder. Now the judge was about to hand down his sentence. Would he send Crone back to death row? This time, the judge decided that Ray Crone's murder conviction did not warrant a death sentence.
He sentenced Ray Crone to life not less than 25 years.
After the life sentence was read, the judge said he was troubled by the outcome of the trial. He said he had lingering doubt about the clear identity of the killer.
He told us that he had real concerns about Ray's guilt, and he said that the case would haunt him for the rest of his life.
It was a remarkable moment. The judge called into question the jury's verdict just moments after sentencing Ray Crone to a life behind bars. Ray, I know you were very disturbed. On one hand, he said he was going to be haunted by your trial for the rest of his life, and yet he sends you off to prison on a life sentence. But was there any sense of relief that it wasn't death row this time?
Really none, because to me it's like, you might as well kill me. I'm still in prison. I'm still a murderer in their eyes. It really didn't change much anything, except I guess I wasn't going to live in that little small box, that little hell that death row was. It was just a bigger hell and a bigger yard and more people and more violence.
Ray's cousin Jim Ricks, who for years worked tirelessly to prove Ray's innocence, was devastated. At this time of Ray's journey, this is strike two. Were you ready to call it quits?
I was ready to go home and be done with it. We're further back now than we were when I got involved, because we had to start the appellate process over.
Despite the disappointment, Ray's team wouldn't quit. They knew the odds were against them, but they decided to appeal once again. The whole time you were working on this, after the second conviction, you weren't that optimistic.
Not at all. I didn't see how we could beat the system. The toughest thing to do is to beat a jury verdict.
Jim's pessimism turned out to be well-founded. An appeal was denied. The court said Ray had received a fair trial, but his defense team was still determined to prove he was not a murderer.
We actually had to find the perpetrator of the crime to prove Ray's innocence.
Trying to prove someone else had committed the murder was a daunting task. Ray languished in jail for 5 long years. But during that time, advances in DNA testing were bringing profound changes to America's legal system.
My attorneys recognized that, hey, this is something we could use.
The court decided to allow new testing of crime scene evidence to see if it matched Ray Crone's DNA. It would also be checked against a national database of convicts. The results seem irrefutable. When did you learn about the DNA results?
I learned about them in January of 2002. Not only did it not match me or Kim, that it actually identified an own individual that had a history of sexual assault against women and children.
I see real emotion in your face as you describe that.
I remember that day well, because again, when you fight a system for that long, the prosecution objected to even having this DNA testing done. They had the nerve to say it was a wild goose chase, it was a fishing expedition, it was a waste of the court's time and money, they said.
The DNA evidence matched a man named Kenneth Phillips, a Native American resident of Phoenix. That confirmed earlier test results showing that hair found at the crime scene belonged to a Native American. At the time of Kim Ancona's murder, Phillips lived just 600 yards away from the crime scene.
He was convicted of a sex crime about 30 days after the Kim Ancona murder and sent to prison. So I had an investigator go see him in prison, and I had him take in a recording device, and they questioned him.
March the 28th, 2002. We're about to begin an interview with Kenneth Phillips.
During questioning, Phillips was asked if he was at the bar on the night Kim Ancona was murdered.
First, he denied it. He had denied it vigorously that he even knew or had ever been to the bar. Then he was told that DNA testing identified him, and he said, well, I was in the bar, and I was drunk, and I blacked out, and I don't know what happened, but I woke up with blood all over me. And he saw on the news about the murder, and he said, oh, my God, did I do that?
The next day, when I heard on TV, the first thing came to my mind was, no, it can't be. Then I'm just sitting there, thinking, saying it over and over in my mind, it can't be, it can't be. Did I do that or what?
Even when prosecutors learned of the new DNA results and Kenneth Phillips' admission, they still weren't convinced that Ray Crone was an innocent man.
They still didn't want to release me. We still had a little battle to go.
The Maricopa County Attorney's Office wanted confirmation, so they ordered more testing of the DNA samples. They also decided to re-examine all of the evidence from the crime scene to see if anything could be connected to Kenneth Phillips.
They went to eventually and checked the fingerprints, and they found his fingerprints actually in the little bathroom where the victim was murdered. They found his fingerprints there and in other places in the bar.
And there was more. Hair and footprints discovered at the crime scene were also found to be a match to Kenneth Phillips. The Phoenix Crime Lab reported one more finding. It was about the bite mark found on Kim Ancona. That mark had been the key evidence used against Ray Crone in 2 murder trials. But now experts said that Kenneth Phillips could not be excluded as the man who made it. Crone's defense team turned up the pressure on prosecutors.
The defense says, look, you got the wrong guy. Look at this evidence. And we're asking that Ray Crone be released. I wasn't directly handling it, the office did. And they decided that they agreed.
Prosecutors decided to dismiss all the charges. Ray's attorney called him in prison with the news.
He said, Ray, how you doing today? I said, fine, just another day in paradise. And he chuckled. He said, well, what are you hungry for? I said, what the devil are you talking about? He said, Ray, I just got off the phone with the prosecutor's office. They're cutting the paperwork. You're coming home today. What did you just say? He said, roll up, Ray. It's all over. You're coming home.
After spending 10 years, 3 months, and 8 days as a convicted murderer, Ray Crone walked out of prison a free man on April 8th, 2002.
Is this really finally happening? Is this true? And then to step out and all the cameras are there, all the reporters are there, because at that moment I was the 100th person in America to have one time to have faced the death penalty, to have been sentenced to death, and later to be freed, to be exonerated.
For Ray Crone, it was a triumphant moment of vindication. But he didn't feel it was a time for celebration. His thoughts were also with Kim Ancona, and he decided his first public words as a free man should be addressed directly to her family.
You have my profoundest sympathy for your suffering and the tragedy that you have overcome, and the suffering all this time. I've never been able to offer grieve with you, and I sincerely mean that. I'm saddened by the way this has all come about.
It is striking to me that after everything you suffered through, that you immediately thought of Kim Ancona's family.
Do you know what it's like to have somebody that hates you? And my only comfort, I guess it was, is knowing that that hatred that family feels is for the person that killed their daughter, the person that killed Kim, not Ray Crone.
A long time to work its way through.
It's hard to imagine that Ray Crone would be a free man if it weren't for the help of someone he hadn't even met until he was on death row, his cousin Jim Ricks. Jim is proud of his contribution to Ray's defense, prouder still of the man he's come to know.
He's a unique individual. First of all, the strength to handle 10 years in prison, some of that on death row, and then to come out with no real animosity is just incredible. He's just a man of great character.
Today, Ray Crone travels around the world speaking out against the death penalty.
What I enjoy is a sense of therapy, so to speak, to talk about what happened and to change what's wrong with our system.
Ray talks about his experience in the hope that it will never happen to anyone else. But he knows that living in the past can be a very lonely business.
I don't drive down the road looking at my rearview mirror about what I passed. You know, I'm going to get in a wreck. It's what's ahead of you. Keep your eyes on what's in the future, what's ahead, and try not to think about what I lost.
Kenneth Phillips eventually pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to 53 years to life. Ray Crone filed a wrongful conviction suit against the city of Phoenix and Maricopa County. He won and was awarded $4.4 million. I'm Paula Zahn. Join us next time when we're back on the case. First, one girl disappeared.
As a father, I just want to come and rescue my little girl.
And then another.
I knew that she wasn't coming home.
A killer was on the loose.
Everybody was scared. If it could happen to her, it can happen to anybody.
Until police closed in on a suspect.
I just do things and I'm not in control. I have nightmares where I remember these murders.
But was it a confession? Or the rantings of a madman?
He fantasizes about it, he researches it, he lives it.
And what did the suspect's identical twin have to do with it?
It's not been easy. I still love my brother.
In spite of all the evil he's responsible for.
Two missing girls, two brothers in the crosshairs.
Did you ever lie to protect your brother?
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Georgetown, Illinois, a farming town with just one stoplight. It was there, on a desolate stretch of road, that a young girl's disappearance sparked an investigation that would expose one man's violent obsession. How had his darkness gone undetected for so long?
Feet drags.
A quiet and studious girl, Jessica was the second daughter of Terry and Lauren Roach.
She was actually a homebody. She was not the kid that wanted to go someplace all the time.
Most afternoons after school, you could find Jessica Roach racing down the country roads close to was no different.
I just got home from working, and she said, I'd like to go for a bike ride, and so she took off.
Jessica's dad barely glanced at his daughter as she left, but he did hear something a little unusual.
I hear a vehicle running on the road, a quarter-mile away from us, and kind of shrugged my shoulders and went on in.
At the same time, Jessica's older sister, Mindy, was making a run to the grocery store.
She actually passed her on the road.
The two sisters waved at each other, but 20 minutes later, when Mindy drove back home, she saw her sister's bicycle lying in the road. She wondered why it was there. Had her sister been hurt? Where was Jessica?
She stopped and kind of hollered for her, but she didn't get any response, and it just made her feel uncomfortable.
Mindy sped home to tell her dad what she had seen. Lauren Roach remembered the engine he had heard idling earlier. Now it took on a darker meaning. He was worried, and he called his wife at work.
When he said Jessie, it was just like, I just kind of went cold.
Lauren then called 911, and investigator Gary Miller was dispatched by the Vermilion County Sheriff.
He told me, that they had a missing person report, and he said, there's something really wrong with this. You need to get down here.
While patrol officers combed the fields for Jessica, investigator Miller tried to find out more about her. Was she the type of girl who might run away?
We talked to people. It seemed less likely that this was a girl who would take off and not let her parents know where she was.
No one had a bad word to say about Jessica nor her family. Even so, Miller grilled her dad hard. He was one of the last people to have seen her.
And it was very tough, but we asked him to take a polygraph test, which he did willingly.
Lauren Roach passed the lie detector test. Those results, combined with the Roaches' seemingly happy family life, convinced the investigator that Jessica had been kidnapped, probably by a stranger.
It's a crime with no crime scene, is basically what it was.
Miller knew that solving the case was going to be tough. The drag marks Lauren Roach said he had seen in the road earlier were no longer there. They had been driven over by the patrol cars.
Every time a vehicle drives over this, it's going to change the makeup of this. It's gravel and dirt and solid underneath, so it's just not going to be something where you're going to leave a lot of prints.
By nightfall, word of Jessica's disappearance had spread across the community.
People just started showing up. I mean, front yard, people showing up, wanting to know what was going on.
Volunteers gathered to search for Jessica. Lauren joined them, and they searched through the night. Terry stayed home by the phone, desperately hoping to hear from her precious girl.
She was not the bravest person when it was dark, so for her to be gone at night was nuts.
But after searching all night, there was still no sign of Jessica.
I remember about the third day that they were searching for her and that she hadn't come home. I knew then that she wasn't coming home.
But that knowledge didn't stop her from seeing glimpses of her daughter everywhere.
Every place I would drive, you just look, you think, oh, well, is that her?
You look at things along the road. You look in the cornfields. You look, you just look at everything.
Investigator Gary Miller and his team were aggressively chasing down leads.
We're just trying to run down everything. And we have to run down everything because we have nothing. We literally had nothing.
And then, 6 weeks after Jessica's disappearance, a girl's naked body was found in a cornfield. But it wasn't in Illinois. It was across the state line, only 20 miles away in Indiana.
Our nightmares came true. We had always suspected something like that had happened, and I just felt like we were looking at, at what our instincts had told us was, probably had taken place.
But instinct wasn't proof. Jessica had no dental records that could help identify her body. But her mother remembered she had been fingerprinted by a visiting sheriff's deputy in 2nd grade as part of a child safety class. Ironically, that deputy had been Gary Miller.
We took some prints off portions of the fingers that would be identifiable and sent those to the lab.
Within days, the lab had a positive ID. It was Jessica. The pathologist concluded she had been strangled to death. For Gary Miller, it was a sobering turning point in the investigation.
At that point, okay, she was abducted. She was murdered.
But what Gary Miller couldn't know was that Jessica's murder investigation would put him on the trail of a predator, and that Jessica may not have been his only victim. Six weeks after she disappeared, the body of 15-year-old Jessica Roach had been found in an Indiana cornfield 20 miles from her home in Illinois. But her parents refused to give in to their grief. They were determined to find their daughter's killer.
I couldn't change what happened to Jessie. You know, that was just the fact. But whoever did this had to be found and stopped.
Weeks passed and then months. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill.
I knew that we were going to need a break. Going back to that scene or going over things was not going to do us any good.
Before her murder, Jessica's hometown had been the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. Now, it was a community consumed by fear. Abby Rommel was 13 at the time.
Everybody was scared. You know, if it could happen to her, it can happen to anybody.
Abby and Kaylin Hoskins used to ride the school bus with Jessica. Her death changed their lives.
Your mom's put you on lockdown, like, you can't leave the house, and unless you're in a group, and, you know, everybody just goes into a frenzy a little bit.
What happened to Jessica was still fresh in their minds 8 months later, when they were approached while riding bikes.
If it wouldn't have been for her, then maybe we wouldn't have known what to do. Or we wouldn't have been so observant.
The girls were out by the railroad tracks just before dusk.
I noticed this van, and I just remember the sound of it, like it was like no muffler, like it was really loud. And he was going really slow past us, and you could see him do one of these numbers, like watching us.
And she said, something's not right.
Abby told her friend not to worry so much, but just a few minutes later, they saw the van again. The driver was leering at them.
So we stop, and he comes past us again, and she's like, maybe he's looking for a house. So we just kind of stopped on the road to where we were at.
But then the van pulled up behind some grain bins. The friends could see the driver watching them.
When we saw him sitting there trying to hide his van,
we decided it was time to go.
Let's get home.
We didn't want to wait any longer.
They raced away, pedaling as fast as they could. The van pulled out behind them. They were being chased. Kaylin worried her friend would have an asthma attack. Then the girls saw their chance to escape.
There was an alley, and there was a truck parked there that was broke down.
Red and white.
And it was parked just perfect where there was no way he could fit through there.
The girls squeezed down the alley past the truck. The van was blocked and had to stop. But even then, the girls were still terrified the man in the van would find them.
We were like, can't leave our bikes in the front yard. He's going to know where we live. And so we went and put them in the garage and just stood there and hugged each other and cried.
Abby told her father what had happened, and together they spent an hour and a half driving around town looking for the van. They had just about given up and were headed for home when Abby spotted it. she started crying hysterically. Her dad managed to get its license plate number.
85B3752. Everybody we could tell, we told. That license plate.
But word of the chase didn't reach Detective Gary Miller. He was still grasping for any clue to advance the investigation.
I would go down to the 911 center, and any plates, license plates that had been run, I got copies of them and would go through them just to see if we had any strange cars or strange events.
It was during one of those searches that Miller finally came across the incident reported by Abby Rommel and Kaylin Hoskins. Miller immediately noticed the similarities to Jessica Roach's abduction. The girls were all riding bikes and had brown hair. The investigator was certain he was onto something. The van was registered to a young man from Wabash, Indiana named Larry Hall.
I simply called the Wabash police and said, hey, do you guys know this guy or who he is? And they're like, oh yeah, we know Larry Hall.
The Wabash police told Miller that Larry Hall had been arrested and released twice in the previous 5 months for stalking. He was the son of the town's gravedigger. They also discovered he had an identical twin brother named Gary.
So how shocked were you when you heard that your brother had confessed to stalking these 11 and 12-year-old girls?
I was shocked and I was upset and I was very embarrassed.
What do you see when you look into the eyes of your brother in old pictures?
Somebody filled with trouble and confusion.
Their DNA was identical, but the differences between the twins were striking. Gary was friendly and had an easy smile. Larry had a stutter and kept his head down. Gary says his brother had a destructive streak and was driven by something dark. But they still shared a bond that was undeniable.
I think Larry and Gary had this classic twin relationship where, especially in Larry's eyes, things were not whole for him. Experiences were not fully lived unless Gary was with him.
By the time they were 22, Gary had moved away from home. Larry seemed to retreat into a shell. He lived in his parents' house, took a night job as a janitor, and barely saw anyone around town.
So much of normal interaction was missing in his life. He was stuck during the day with these aged parents. He worked at night in these empty offices.
The Wabash police knew Larry well, but even with his history of stalking, they didn't believe he posed a threat to anyone. But to Miller, he looked like a potential suspect.
There was enough there that we wanted to go over and interview him personally.
There was no hard evidence linking Larry Hall to Jessica Roach's murder. But Miller still wanted to question him directly. So he made the 3-hour drive across the state line to Wabash, Indiana. He had no idea what was waiting for him there. Coming up, Larry Hall's moment of truth.
I laid Jessica Roach's picture in front of him, and he went like this, raised his hands and turned his head.
Homicide investigator Gary Miller was still searching for Jessica Roach's killer. He had just found a report about a man who had stalked 2 girls not far from where Jessica had disappeared. Now Miller wanted to see if those cases were connected. Investigator Miller had driven nearly 3 hours from Illinois, hoping for a one-on-one interrogation at the police station with Larry Hall. He arrived to a room full of people.
It wasn't just him and Larry, but they were surrounded by other detectives.
Those detectives wanted to know if Larry Hall had anything to do with another cold case. the disappearance of a 19-year-old college student named Tricia Reitler.
What did you lose when Tricia disappeared?
I lost a firstborn child and a very close friend.
The missing student was vivacious, beautiful Tricia Reitler. She had vanished from the Indiana Wesleyan campus a few months before Jessica Roach had been killed. Tricia's father, Gary, is still haunted by the last words he heard her say.
I drove her back to college, and it was after spring break. I still remember her leaning up against the door frame and looked at me as I started walking away. She started crying, and she said, "Dad, please don't go."
Just days later, he received a phone call.
It's every parent's worst nightmare to think about harm coming to our children.
Right.
Describe to me the first call you got from law enforcement.
Basically, it was a police officer from Marion in Indiana saying, "This is so-and-so from Marion, Indiana. Do you know where your daughter is?" First thought in my mind is that Tricia was dead.
It jumped to that.
I knew she would not have done this on her own. And from that moment on, you know, we've kind of known in our hearts, you know, that she was no longer alive.
The last place Tricia had been seen was at a supermarket near her residence hall. She had bought a soda and a magazine. Police think she then took a shortcut back to her dorm, across a field.
It's in that area that investigators searching then discovered her clothing, some of her clothing.
Someone had arranged Tricia's blood-stained shoes and jeans in a neat pile. That discovery triggered an intense search.
We brought in dogs, helicopters, planes, different things of that nature, an attempt to locate her.
The desperate search continued for 5 weeks without any luck. Then Marion police got a break. They learned Larry Hall had been caught stalking 2 girls who were playing basketball, not far from Tricia's last known whereabouts.
In his car are found articles about Tricia's disappearance, stationery where he's written her name, and what the police later called an abduction kit.
The kit consisted of knives, rope, a mask, and some tarp.
Clearly, he was following girls and stuff that night. He had material on him to use to abduct or tie up.
Hall was brought in for questioning.
We took him in that night to interview him. In those interviews, then, we started to discover that Larry would say that, you know, he had bad dreams.
During the interrogation, Larry described his dreams in vivid detail. He said in one of them, he killed Tricia Reitler, strangling her near a tree. Just as Gary Miller had done, investigators in the Tricia Reitler case called authorities in Larry's hometown of Wabash, Indiana, to see what they knew about him. This call was made months after the murder of Jessica Roach.
Nate told him he was a harmless guy. He was stalking girls, but there's never any indication that he was going to do anything physically to them.
In the end, the investigators questioning Larry concluded that they were listening to the fantasies of a disturbed man and not the confession of a killer.
It's clearly in his mind. He fantasizes about it, he researches it, he lives it, he does things like that. One thing that I personally struggle with at sometimes is whether he has the heart to do it.
Despite all the evidence that seemed to connect Hall to Tricia Reitler's disappearance, no charges were filed, and Larry Hall was released.
How bitter does that make you?
I just don't understand that. I don't understand how they let him go. Looking back, I think that they would probably change that.
Now, 6 months after his release, those same investigators were there when Gary Miller arrived to question Larry Hall about the murder of Jessica Roach. Larry was Miller's only suspect in the case, and as the interrogation began, He says Larry was wringing his hands nervously and refused to look him in the eye. Miller decided to turn up the heat.
I laid Jessica Roach's picture in front of him. I said, do you ever remember that girl? When I laid her picture in front of him, he went like this, raised his hands and turned his head.
At that moment, investigator Miller thought he had found Jessica's killer. But he still had to prove it. And in the last minutes of their interview, Larry Hall gave Miller the break he was looking for. He said he had been in Georgetown the weekend of Jessica's murder, attending a military reenactment.
After we talked for a while, he said he remembered being in a town. He remembered that the town had a stoplight, and there was a Hardee's by it. Well, that's a description of Georgetown.
Larry Hall had just placed himself near the scene of Jessica Roach's abduction, but Miller needed more. He asked Larry Hall to take a polygraph test.
When we got down there, he said he didn't want to take a polygraph.
Larry refused the test, but then he started to cry and tell a story about another dream. In this one, he abducted a 15-year-old girl.
There was a girl walking a bike. I stopped and talked to her. I had to grab her. I tied her up, but I can't remember with what. I put a belt around her neck, and she stopped breathing. I just do things, and I'm not in control. I have nightmares where I remember these murders.
To investigator Miller, it didn't seem like Larry was describing dreams. He believed he was hearing a confession to the murder of Jessica Roach.
There was no question in my mind he was telling me the truth. I mean, you could see it in him. He wasn't hesitant. He wasn't being fed any information.
Larry agreed to sign an official written statement confirming what he had just said about Jessica's murder. And then Miller arrested him on the spot. He planned to bring him back to Illinois the next day to face charges. But when he arrived in the morning, Hall had reversed himself.
He says, well, you know, I was only telling you about my dreams. I said, everything you told me was a dream? Yeah, I dreamed that I killed her.
Was it a confession or a dream? As Miller drove back to Illinois with Larry in custody, he wondered what it all meant for his case. Coming up, Larry Hall said they were just bad dreams. But what will he say when investigators confront him with real evidence?
It was almost like a to-do list after you had a body in there.
Larry Hall was under arrest for the murder of Jessica Roach, but investigators felt they still needed to find hard evidence to put him behind bars. Jessica Roach had been abducted in Illinois, and her body was found in a cornfield in Indiana. The crossing of state lines made her death a federal case. Lead investigator Gary Miller turned to the FBI for help. Federal agents obtained a warrant for Hall's van and did a far more comprehensive search than the one done earlier. They took the van apart piece by piece and discovered some very suspicious items. Larry Beaumont was in charge of the investigation.
There was a photograph of a young girl that he wrote Jessica on.
Was it a reference to Jessica Roach? The prosecutor thought so, especially when road maps were also discovered that seemed to connect Larry to the crime scene.
One of the maps, he had the exact locations where Jessica's body was found and where Jessica was kidnapped, circled.
And the evidence didn't just connect Larry to the Jessica Roach case. Some of the most startling items found were handwritten notes Larry had written describing his actions around the time of college student Tricia Reitler's abduction.
I think the notes are incredibly incriminating. They're consistent with what we know from the last sightings of Tricia. They indicate how he stalked the area over and over again.
One note referred to the exact intersection outside Marsh's supermarket, the last place Tricia had been seen. Seen many nice girls at Marsh's, Larry writes. Seen joggers and bikers, many alone. Then in a note dated a week after Tricia's disappearance, Larry reminds himself to cut out stained carpet, burn paint tarps, buy new hacksaw blades, clean all tools. To investigators, it read like the secret diary of a killer.
It was almost like a to-do list after you had a body in there.
We were pretty confident we would have a pretty decent case.
Authorities believe they had gathered compelling evidence against Larry Hall in both Jessica and Tricia's cases. But as a federal prosecutor, Beaumont didn't have jurisdiction in the Reitler case.
The problem is that the Reitler case was really a local homicide case. Because they didn't find a body, there was no interstate aspects.
Because Jessica was abducted in Illinois and found in Indiana, federal kidnapping laws let Beaumont move against Larry Hall. Beaumont also knew Gary Hall had traveled to war reenactments with his twin brother in Larry's van. Now that the van had been found with incriminating evidence, investigators decided to take a hard look at Gary Hall.
Did you ever help your brother kidnap or harm women?
No, never.
So you never found yourself in a situation where you were traveling with your brother where he got you unwittingly involved?
Not at all.
Beaumont also wondered if the twins' father was trying to protect Larry. He claimed to have a receipt from a mechanic proving that Larry's van was being serviced at the time of Jessica's abduction. The prosecutor went to the mechanic himself to check it out.
When we got there, there was a sign on the door that says, "You can meet me at my attorney's office." And we went to the attorney's office, and basically what happened was the owner of the shop admitted that his dad came in and begged him to create a phony invoice.
Ultimately, no charges were brought against Gary nor his father. But prosecutors now felt they had enough against Larry Hall to get a conviction. On December 21st, 1994, he was charged with kidnapping in federal court. At his trial, the prosecution showed the evidence collected from Hall's van, as well as what they said was a detailed confession of the abduction and murder of Jessica Roach. The defense argued that Larry Hall was a disturbed man who dreamed about killing women and talked about those dreams as a way of gaining attention. The jury sided with the prosecution. After deliberating less than 5 hours, the jurors convicted Hall of kidnapping. The sentence was life without parole in federal prison. Jessica's parents took comfort that Larry Hall would now be off the streets.
I can remember thinking, why did Jessie have to be the last one? She's the one who caught him. And I think that's important to know that he's not going to be out there anymore.
But the prosecutor wasn't satisfied. The Reitlers still didn't know what had happened to their daughter.
I was always very bothered by the fact that the Reitler's daughter just disappeared and vanished.
He was about to put in place a daring plan to corner Larry Hall and get justice for Tricia once and for all. Coming up, can a convicted felon uncover Larry Hall's secrets?
He says, we'd like to know if you would be interested in going undercover in a maximum security prison.
If he didn't find the body, he wasn't going to get anything.
Want more on the case? Go to investigationdiscovery.com/Paula Zahn and view more exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes video. Larry Hall had been sentenced to life in prison for the abduction of Jessica Roach. But investigators thought Hall still had secrets to reveal, and the parents of Tricia Reitler hoped one of them would lead to their little girl.
You know she's out there somewhere. Physically, she's there somewhere.
For more than 15 years, Tricia Reitler's parents have been on a mission to find their daughter's body.
Where has your search for answers taken you?
Swamps, lakes.
You mean physically? We've been in people's dining rooms where they've laid a map out on the table saying where she is, and there's X's marked on a map. Yeah. Within seconds of showing up at the site, you realize it's just futile.
The federal prosecutor who convicted Larry Hall for the kidnapping of Jessica Roach wanted to help the Reitler family as well.
They don't have any answers. Yeah, they just don't know what happened.
In the days after the Roach trial, Larry Beaumont organized a search of the massive nature reserve where Larry Hall had told investigators he had buried Tricia's body. While an Army unit combed the woods with cadaver dogs, an FBI plane searched from above.
We actually went out and spent days out there, but we couldn't find any.
Frustrated, the prosecutor came up with a bold plan. Maybe Larry would open up about Tricia's case if he were talking to a person he trusted instead of investigators. Beaumont needed someone to go undercover.
We really didn't know what it was about until we got there.
He contacted Jimmy Keene, a former high school football player and the son of a police officer who was now in serious trouble. He was facing a 10-year sentence on a drug charge. Beaumont offered Keene a deal.
He says, we'd like to know if you would be interested in going undercover in a maximum security prison and try and help us solve this case.
The deal on the table? Get Larry Hall to reveal the location of Tricia Reitler's body, and then Keene would get an early release from prison.
Told him specifically, no body, no credit. If he didn't find the body, he wasn't going to get anything. It would be a waste of time.
Keene took the deal and was transferred to the maximum security psychiatric hospital in Missouri, where Larry Hall was being held. Inside the facility, only the warden and the chief doctor would know Keene was working undercover. On the first day of the operation, Keene bumped into Larry Hall and asked him for directions to the library.
And I said, thanks a lot, I appreciate that from a cool guy like you. And that was my first break with him, because his reaction to me was, you think I'm a cool guy?
Did he say that out loud?
Yeah, and he bugged his eyes real big and he says, do you think I'm a cool guy? Like nobody in his life had ever said he was a cool guy.
The two men started spending time together. One day, they were watching TV when an aggressive prisoner tried to change the channel. Keene saw that as an opportunity to impress Larry. He went after the inmate.
I beat him to a pulp in front of Larry and Larry's little friends.
That was a pretty crazy thing to do.
It was a gutsy thing to do, yeah. But this is what I felt was the right thing to do at that moment.
The prison guards, who had no idea Keene was an FBI plant, threw him into solitary confinement overnight.
I seen Larry that morning in the breakfast hall line. And when him and I were sitting down talking, you could just tell he felt very close to me now, like I was a protector to him.
Over time, Keene won Larry's trust. The two started spending time in Larry's cell. And in that dimly lighted room, Keene says Larry opened up about killing Jessica Roach.
He took her up to this tree and he strangled her to death.
Larry described the attack in gruesome detail.
You had to be sick inside when you hear him say these things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it was very hard for me to pull back, you know, because I just looked at him as like the lowest form of life that there is. And I'm looking at him like I want to rip his head off.
Then, just a few weeks later, Hall told Keene he had also killed Tricia Reitler.
He said he started choking her in a rage of panic because she was fighting so strongly against him.
And then Hall said he blacked out. And when he woke up, Tricia was lying dead beside him.
He decided he was going to get a lantern and he was going to use lime and he was going to take her way out in the woods and he was going to bury her with lime.
Hall had told police similar stories, but Keene needed to get the missing piece of proof. Where had Hall buried Tricia?
I physically feel sick, as you described.
Yes.
What Larry Hall shared with you.
I felt physically sick when I was around him, but I didn't have a lot of alternatives.
Keene knew he was close to winning his freedom, but Hall still hadn't revealed exactly where he had buried Tricia. Then a few days later, Keene says he got his answer when he came across Larry carving tiny falcons in the wood shop.
He had a map laid out in front of him of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. His first reaction was to dive on the map and fold it up and cover it up really fast.
Then Larry explained that the falcons were totems to watch over the dead.
And I was kind of like, wow, that's pretty wild. And he goes, do you want one? I said, no, Larry, I got a lot of life left in me.
Keene felt certain the location of Tricia Reitler's body would be found on that map. He contacted his FBI handler for the undercover operation with the news, leaving an urgent message. But after he was done, he couldn't resist taunting Larry Hall by revealing his secret mission and its reward.
I said, Larry, I'm going to be going home tomorrow because the FBI told me to have me out within 24 hours. And I says, Larry, I think you're one pathetic piece of, and I went on with a tirade of different terms I called him. And I said, to me, you're the lowest level of life on the planet. And he slid back away from me.
The intense confrontation brought prison guards who knew nothing about the undercover operation. They separated the two men and eventually placed Keene in solitary confinement. It took days for the FBI to get Keene's message about what he had learned. And by the time they got it, the map had disappeared. Keene passed a polygraph test about the map, and authorities were convinced he had told them the truth. Even though the undercover operation failed, Jimmy Keene was eventually released and granted a full pardon.
We still rewarded him for the effort because obviously he spent 7 or 8 months with Larry Hall. I mean, that deserves some credit.
After his identical twin brother was sentenced to life in prison back in 1995, Gary Hall's life seemed to spiral out of control. He lost his job, and his second marriage fell apart.
Do you have any sense of guilt that you weren't able to stop your brother?
Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?
What do you think of your brother today?
You want the truth, I'm sure.
I want the truth.
It just amazes me that how he got by with it for so long.
In 2009, Gary went with cold case investigators to Larry's prison to urge him to come clean once and for all.
When I met him for the last time, in July of 2009, I cried with him. And I realized that I still love my brother.
In spite of all the evil he's responsible for.
It's not been easy. It's not been easy, and he sickens me. But at the same time, I hurt because I miss him.
Larry still hasn't revealed the location of Tricia's body, but there is hope that in time, he will reveal everything he may know. After Tricia disappeared, Donna and Gary Reitler fought the impulse to become overprotective parents with their other children. And as much as they still miss Tricia, through the years, they say they've grown stronger and closer as a family. I'm Paula Zahn, Join us next time when we're back on the case. They were elegant, refined, but their murder was savage.
The brutality, the inhumanity, was just indescribable.
It looked like the work of a sinister stranger.
Mr. Haysom had a V cut in his chin, so it had the possibility of a satanic ritual.
Then some evidence began pointing closer to home.
Why don't my parents just lie down and die? I despise them so much.
A daughter filled with hate.
We can get rid of them soon.
Her boyfriend consumed by love.
I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was being a hero who was saving his girlfriend's life.
They were young and in love. Were they killers or just misunderstood?
I did not do it. I was an 18-year-old, emotionally underdeveloped idiot.
I'm Paula Zahn. Tonight, we're on the case in Bedford County, Virginia, just outside of Lynchburg, where the gruesome double murder of a well-respected couple shocked even detectives and gripped a quiet community with fear. April 3rd, 1985. The police scanner in the WSET newsroom suddenly erupted with chatter. Executive producer Jeff Taylor was shocked by what he heard.
We heard there had been a murder out on Holcomb Rock Road. And when I found out the address, I knew immediately it was the Haysoms.
Derek and Nancy Haysom were well-known, respected, and members of the Lynchburg, Virginia social scene. To Taylor, they were also good friends. He had been to their house so many times and knew it so well, police asked for his help.
I talked to the sheriff there, and he said, come on in. I want you to take a look and see what's going on. And
which is highly unusual.
Very
Usually
unusual.
Reporters are not invited by law enforcement to come look at the murder
Very
scene.
true. But the sheriff and I were pretty good friends, and we'd known each other a long time, and he knew I'd be honest with him about what was going on with the Haysoms.
Can you describe what you saw when you were led into their home?
It was an awful bloody mess. It was an unbelievable murder scene.
Derek Haysom lay in the living room doorway, stabbed 36 times. His throat was slit. His wife Nancy was in the kitchen, also repeatedly stabbed and nearly decapitated.
I wasn't sure what to really expect, but I didn't expect what I saw. The brutality, the inhumanity of that kind of a crime was just indescribable.
The bodies had been discovered by a family friend, prompted by a call from the Haysoms' daughter Elizabeth, who was away at college. She hadn't been able to reach her parents. Investigators determined that the Haysoms had been dead for several days and that they had fiercely fought for their lives.
Mr. Haysom was a big man, and he fought back for the best he could. Some of the wounds were superficial wounds, which I feel that the perpetrator was just stabbing to keep him off of Mr. Haysom off of him.
The Haysoms lived in a gracious home in an affluent neighborhood. Who would kill such a prominent couple? At first, investigators thought that the crime could have been a robbery gone horribly wrong.
We couldn't detect anything that was stolen. We could not locate a forced entry into the residence, so we were able to eliminate a burglary.
Crime scene investigators collected more than 100 pieces of evidence, including a seat cushion with what looked like a bloody handprint and a bloody sock print on the hardwood floor. News of the murder spread quickly through the tight-knit community of Bedford County.
People in the neighborhood were scared to death.
Anxiety fueled by an analysis of photos by forensic experts at the crime lab. They said the evidence revealed signs of a ritual killing.
They started closing in on certain clues that they thought that it could be a satanic murder.
The crime scene photos showed 3 chairs in the dining room pointed towards the north. Blood was deliberately smeared around the contours of the bodies. There appeared to be a letter V with a tiny 6 inside it, written in blood on the floor.
Mr. Haysom had a V cut in his chin. And there were several other little things that they saw that would lend themselves to the possibility of a satanic ritual.
There were some prominent people whose children was involved in some of this stuff out on the Rivermont area of Lynchburg. Again, it was a group in Roanoke that would meet on the Parkway.
As Detective Reed looked into the cult angle, he heard about wild midnight parties where squirrels were boiled alive, their blood used to paint pentagrams on cult members' bodies. Rumors about the bizarre, violent rituals gripped the people of Bedford County.
It just led to constant rumors and speculation that just further kind of inflamed the community.
There were all these conjectures about what was going on and who was doing it.
Police were under pressure to deliver the Haysoms' murderer, but they didn't limit their investigation to a satanic cult. They had also taken a comprehensive look at the Haysoms' background.
We interviewed people that had done gardening work, neighbors, acquaintances, people that they played bridge with, family members.
Detectives learned that the Haysoms had moved to their secluded home only a few years before.
This was their retirement place. This is where they planned to live a long and prosperous old age life, and it just didn't work out that way.
Derek had been a CEO of a steel company in Canada. His wife, Nancy, had grown up in nearby Lynchburg.
Nancy Haysom was a relative of Lady Astor. Derek Haysom was the Lee Iacocca of Nova Scotia. And so these were people that had just come to the area, were new, were, you know, the darlings of the social scene.
Derek, 72 years old, loved cars, a good bridge game, and staying fit. Nancy, 53, focused on the local art community. They had 5 grown children from previous marriages. Only one of them lived in the States. But the daughter they had together, Elizabeth, was in her first year at the University of Virginia, not far from Bedford. Detectives questioned her.
She talked about her father's profession in Nova Scotia and the fact that he had had some dealings with some of the unions up in Nova Scotia, and that possibility that he had made somebody mad up there.
The homicide squad started digging. It turned out Derek Haysom's successful career in the steel industry had been plagued by turmoil.
He had been in Rhodesia, which had become Zimbabwe, and there had been all these things that had been going on, retaliation killings down in that country, and he had been there. That's one of the reasons Derek left and went to Nova Scotia, because he wanted his family safe.
In Nova Scotia, other business scandals followed Haysom.
We pretty much came to the realization that this was not a random act, that the Haysoms, Mr. and Ms. Haysom, was targeted.
Had the Haysoms been victims of a professional hit, an assassination, or was the killing part of a cult ritual? The homicide squad had a lot on its plate. The investigation was about to get its first big break, and a prime suspect.
She admitted she hated, and she would like to kill the Haysoms.
Investigators in Bedford County, Virginia, were interviewing hundreds of people about the murders of Derek and Nancy Haysom. They had looked at Derek's business enemies abroad and even considered the possibility of a satanic cult killing. In sedate Bedford County, the possibility of a cult killing was terrifying. But not everyone was buying into that theory.
Outside of the investigators, you were one of the few people to have seen the murder scene. What did you think? Had you seen any of that?
Not really. It looked like there was a bloody murder scene that somebody had tried to clean up and realized they couldn't.
But there was nothing you saw at the crime scene that would have made you believe that you were looking at a satanic symbol.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. It was just a brutal, hate-filled murder. And that's what it seemed like to me. And then, but people were scared, and rumors were running rampant, and people were frightened.
The theory of a cult killing was intriguing, but didn't produce any solid leads, so investigators ruled it out. Other possibilities were also eliminated. Police found no evidence to suggest the murders were the result of Derek Hasem's business dealings or of a burglary gone wrong. But throughout all the bizarre twists and turns in the case, investigators never lost sight of the old maxim: to focus the investigation close to home.
If you're in a field of ponies, don't look for a unicorn, because it's just make it simple. Because 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be an acquaintance or a family member.
A new lead was about to point the investigation in just that direction. Police got a tip about the jilted fiancé of one of the Hasem sons.
She had dated the youngest son, Julian. And apparently, she felt a lot of Julian. When their relationship broke up, she felt that Mr. and Miss Hasem was the cause of it.
A friend of the young woman added fuel to the fire with an interesting story.
I had gotten information from an individual. She had brought some knives to him to keep. She said that demons were possessing her, and she felt like that if she had the knives around, she would do something that she shouldn't do.
The trail suddenly turned red hot. When Reed questioned her, she admitted her hatred of the Hasems, blaming them for ruining her engagement to Julian.
I took her down for a polygraph. 2 questions was asked. Did you kill Mr. and Miss Hasem? The second question, was you there when they were killed? Well, when she answered both of those questions, she showed deception.
Reed knew his suspect was from a prominent family and heard she was emotionally fragile. So he worked carefully, putting the pieces together quietly behind the scenes. There were sock prints at the crime scene that experts believed to be a woman's, and the jilted fiancé fit a profile of the murderer generated by 2 FBI specialists.
We called them in to do the psychological profiling on it. And from viewing the crime scene and what evidence we had, the way they do their evaluations, that's what they came up with. Female, an acquaintance with the family.
Detectives continued building their case, but then the young woman surprised everyone, including her own lawyer, by asking for another polygraph test.
She was pretty adamant she wanted to clear herself because said she was innocent. So I carried her back in July for a second polygraph, which she passed.
She also voluntarily submitted fingerprints, footprints, and blood samples. Nothing was a match to any of the evidence found at the crime scene.
So that pretty much eliminated her.
A promising lead was gone. Detectives were frustrated and back to square one. But there was another young woman who had raised a few eyebrows during her interview with the investigators, the Hasem's daughter, Elizabeth. TV reporter Jeff Taylor was there in his capacity as a Hasem family friend. He expected to see a shattered young woman, but given the circumstances, she seemed oddly at ease, even cavalier.
It was a very strange meeting. It was a very strange...
How so?
It wasn't like her parents had just been murdered. It was like, I'm sorry, we had to get together under these circumstances. It's been a long time. You look great. How's the family? And I'm like, you know, your parents have just been murdered. I mean, I was like, it just seemed awkward and odd.
Not only had Elizabeth's demeanor seemed odd, it seemed suspicious. Investigators questioned her about where she said she was on the weekend of the murders.
She stated that her and her boyfriend, Jens Soring, who was German, had rented a car in Charlottesville and drove to Washington, D.C. and spent the weekend in Washington, D.C. sightseeing.
But when investigator Reed tracked down the rental car, there were 669 miles on it from that weekend. A round trip from Charlottesville to Washington is only 240 miles.
And I talked to Elizabeth about it, and she acknowledged the fact that they had gotten lost, which just didn't make sense because I don't know how you could get that lost over a weekend.
Elizabeth didn't seem evasive, and she agreed to provide blood and fingerprints to the team without hesitation. So they decided to follow up with her German boyfriend Jens to hear what he had to say about that weekend.
Jens made himself scarce. He just wouldn't return our calls or talk to us. That's why it made it that much more necessary to talk to him.
By not making himself available to police, Jens Soring had made himself an important target of the investigation. Things were heating up, and police would have their hands full with the clever and cagey young couple. Coming up, a game of cat and mouse between police and the college couple.
We have two individuals. They have been around the world, and they can't find their way from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C.
Promising leads in the investigation of Derek and Nancy Hasem's murder had not led to any arrests. But detectives had more questions for the Hasem's youngest daughter, Elizabeth, and they still hadn't spoken with her German boyfriend, Jens. Investigators finally tracked down the elusive Jens Soring. The first thing they wanted to know was his explanation for the extra mileage on the car he and Elizabeth rented the weekend of the murder.
That's when we questioned him on the 429 extra miles on the vehicle.
He went back through the weekend with the rental car, getting lost, pretty much echoed what Elizabeth had told us earlier.
My thinking is that we have two individuals who are worldly, have been around the world, one's from Germany, and they can't find their way from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C., going straight up 29.
The rental car mileage wasn't the only thing that had made Jens a person of interest. When he attended the Hasem's funeral, he had a bruise on his face and bandages on his fingers. Investigators had already determined that Derek Hasem had struggled with his attacker. Jens' injuries seemed very suspicious. So Gardner and Reed asked for blood and print samples, but Jens refused.
He was using the excuse that his father was a German diplomat and that if the State Department found out that a German diplomat's son was being suspected of murder, that he and his family would be deported.
Was Jens Soring really protecting his family, or did he have something to hide? Detectives tried to find out more about the teenager from West Germany. If you would, describe yourself in 1985. What kind of kid were you?
What Americans would call a nerd. You know, I was very much focused on my schoolwork. Basically, I was an academically oriented person. I was intellectually precocious, emotionally underdeveloped. Grew up very, very sheltered.
Jens arrived at the University of Virginia with a full 4-year scholarship.
Jens Soring looked very young for his age. Sort of a bowl haircut, big, thick glasses.
Amy Lemley was a sophomore at the time. Like Jens, she was an Eckel Scholar, one of the most prestigious academic honors on campus. It was through this elite group that they both had met Elizabeth Hasem.
Elizabeth enjoyed being the center of attention. By far, she was the most unusual person in her dormitory. The very facts of her life, having lived abroad, traveled as an 18, 19-year-old across Europe by herself, All of this stuff made her quite an interesting character.
She was by far the most popular girl in the dorm. She was 2 years older than everybody else. She was, wild and eccentric, and, everybody was after her.
Investigators learned Jens and Elizabeth developed a friendship, which blossomed into a romance, based in part on an intense intellectual and emotional bond, but also on a burning desire to get away from their parents.
I think that for each, the desire for independence from their parents resonated. And they would write letters back and forth to each other, talking about that.
In her letters to Jens, Elizabeth expressed frustration and resentment at how controlling her parents could be. She was rebellious, using drugs, and exploring her sexuality. In Jens, she had found a kindred spirit, someone who shared her intense feelings and was head over heels in love with her.
How intoxicating was it to be in love with her?
How intoxicating was it for me? Well, it was my first sexual relationship, and for an 18-year-old boy, that's about as intoxicating as it gets. And her roommate called us the Rabbits, which I guess summarizes our relationship in a lot of ways. It was just a really intense freshman love affair.
And now the young lovers were suspects in a murder case. When investigators met with Jens, he finally agreed to provide them with blood and print samples and made an appointment for October 9th, an appointment he wouldn't keep.
The following week, we learned that Elizabeth and Jens had left the country.
The couple was on the run, and the community was shocked by the implication.
One can't help think when people run, people that the police want to talk to more about an unbelievably bad and brutal murder, that there's some guilt involved in that.
Coming up, will Elizabeth's words come back to haunt her?
In her letters to you, she would say
that she hated her parents and she wanted to
she wished they would be dead.
That's what teenagers say, okay? It's not nice, but that's the truth.
More than 5 months after the murders of Derek and Nancy Haysom, investigators had begun to focus on their daughter Elizabeth and her boyfriend Jens. They had questions about the couple's alibi, but instead of facing investigators, the couple took off, fleeing the country on separate flights. Right from the start, investigators were suspicious of Jens Soring. He seemed elusive and had refused to provide any blood samples or prints. And when he fled the country, it couldn't have made him look more guilty to detectives.
The two of you had to know the law was going to catch up with you.
Which is why we went on the run. Our assumption was that basically the police were, immediately going to arrest us. We thought this was going to happen within like a day or two.
But before police could make their move, the couple was gone. And now they were the prime suspects in a murder case.
We made some contacts with Interpol to let them know if they were found in Europe or wherever in the world to let us know. And that was about all we could do at that particular time because we didn't have any idea where they were.
By then, the lab had processed the blood found at the Haysom house. These were the days before DNA testing was available, so investigators could only test for blood type. The results showed large amounts of Derek and Nancy's rare blood types, A and AB. But they also uncovered one spot of B blood, Elizabeth's blood type. And there were 5 samples of O blood, the most common blood type of all.
O-type blood could have been anybody's with O-type blood. It just didn't match the family.
Investigators were confident the type O blood was left by the murderer. Did that blood belong to Jens? And did the bloody sock prints at the scene match his? Police didn't have any idea because they never got a sample of his blood or his footprint. Yen's lack of cooperation had handcuffed police. But more than 5 months after he and Elizabeth disappeared, the investigation got the break it needed. It came from an out-of-the-blue phone call from a British detective.
His first question was if Elizabeth Hasem's parents were dead. And I said, yes, they are. And he asked me, were they murdered? And I said, yes, they were. And he says, I believe we have the murderers in jail.
Jens and Elizabeth had been arrested in London for check fraud. After a search of the apartment where the couple had been staying, British detectives found a diary and a stash of letters. The exchanges between them hinted at a far more serious crime.
Why don't my parents just lie down and die? I despise them so much.
I've felt this. I'm feeling it now inside me. This need to plant one's foot in somebody's face.
Would it be possible to hypnotize my parents, do voodoo on them, will them to death?
Other exchanges appeared to show the formation of a calculated plan.
We can either wait till we graduate and leave them behind, or we can get rid of them soon.
The fact that there have been many burglaries in the area opens up the possibility for another one with the same circumstances, only this time.
Jens never finished that thought, but a cryptic entry by Elizabeth seemed to link Jens directly to the crime scene.
The case is about to be solved. Perhaps fingerprints on coffee mug used by Jens in Bedford interview gave him away.
Their own words seemed to spell out Elizabeth and Jens' willingness to commit murder.
It was really hard, for example, to hear an entry from the diaries and not say, well, my God, how could anyone believe they didn't do it? I mean, it was, their own words were more than compelling.
In her letters to you, she would say
that she hated her parents and she wanted
she wished they would be dead.
She did say she hated her parents and that she wished they were dead. But here's the thing, okay? And this is something that, of course, nobody wants to really face. That's what teenagers say, okay? It's not nice, but that's the truth.
Investigators believe the incriminating letters showed beyond any doubt the motive for the murders. They wanted to interrogate the couple right away. Gardner jumped on a plane for England, where he questioned Elizabeth.
Talked to Elizabeth with her solicitor present. She talked about how much she loved her parents.
Then he used the confiscated diaries and letters as leverage.
We broke out the letters, and then she started refusing to answer.
Detectives turned up the heat, interviewing them over and over again until they began to crack. The technique seemed to work in breaking down the couple.
I think there was a total of 6 interviews with Jens and maybe 5 with Elizabeth while we were in London.
The pressure mounted. Jens asked for a private meeting with Detective Gardner.
He sent word that he wanted to talk to me alone. And that's when he and I went into the room, and he told me that he was going to tell me the truth.
And Jens Soring's version of the truth was stunning. He confessed to murdering Derek and Nancy Hasem. They confronted Elizabeth about her boyfriend's story.
And that's when she confessed of her involvement of the murders.
Investigators got a detailed account. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. Elizabeth described a meticulous plan, which included her staying in Washington, D.C. to set up an alibi for Jens' murderous trip to Lynchburg. The remarkably cold and calculated plan to kill her own parents amazed investigators.
A crime of this kind of brutality, you just don't associate with a family murder.
According to her confession, Elizabeth purchased 2 tickets for various movies in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, April 30th, 1985. She took notes on the theater's architecture so Jens would have details to describe them accurately. She also ordered from room service and even cashed a check in Yen's name. All of it designed to leave a clear trail that they had both been in Washington, while Jens went to Lynchburg and killed her parents. During his confession, Jens confirmed Elizabeth's story. He said he committed the murders himself, describing them in grisly detail. He said he confronted Derek with a knife and stabbed him repeatedly. When Nancy tried to defend her husband, Jens slit her throat, even as Derek tried to fend him off. During the struggle, Jens said he cut 2 fingers on his own left hand and suffered a bruise above his eye.
He says that Mr. Haysom hit him in the face and it knocked his glasses off. And the struggle was on with Mr. Haysom, that Mr. Haysom refused to die and that he fought like a big bear.
Derek eventually collapsed in the doorway of the living room. Nancy died in the kitchen. It looked like the violent impulses written about in Elizabeth's diary had become a grisly reality.
Elizabeth wanted him gone. She found an individual who she could manipulate and use to do her deeds for her. And unfortunately, Jens, he was just madly in love with a girl who thought that really cared for him.
2 brilliant college students with bright futures were charged with murder. Now, authorities wanted to bring them to the U.S. to face justice for their crimes. Elizabeth didn't fight extradition nor the charges. In August 1987, she stood before a judge in a Bedford County courtroom.
Are you guilty as charged in the indictment or not guilty?
Guilty as an accessory before the fact.
Elizabeth was quiet, seemed contrite, was cooperative during her court proceedings. She pleaded guilty as an accessory before the fact, so there was not a jury trial.
Elizabeth was given 2 45-year sentences for her role in each of her parents' murders. The sentences would be served consecutively. What was it like when you visited Elizabeth in jail?
She wanted everything to end and be over with and have a resolution and go on and accept whatever was going to happen and deal with it at that point.
And part of dealing with that was to promise to testify against Jens Soering if prosecutors could get him back to Virginia. And that wouldn't be easy. Coming up, a star-crossed lover recants his confession.
I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was being a hero who was saving his girlfriend's life.
Why?
I loved her.
Want more on the case? Go to investigationdiscovery.com/Paulazan and view more exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes video. 5 years after the murders of Derek and Nancy Haysom, their daughter Elizabeth confessed to plotting the crime. Her boyfriend Jens had confessed to committing the murders. But as the son of a German diplomat, Jens believed he could arrange his extradition back to his native Germany, sparing him a trial in U.S. courts and a possible death penalty. From his prison cell in England, Jens Soering's legal strategy was based on a simple premise. He would face a much lighter sentence if his case was heard in Germany.
The Americans had filed an extradition request for capital murder, so I would face the electric chair. The German government was trying to extradite me to Germany, where I would face a non-capital trial.
After 4 years of legal maneuvering, a deal was struck. England would send Jens Soering back to Virginia. In exchange, the death penalty was taken off the table. When he learned his case would be handled by the U.S. justice system, Jens made a startling reversal and recanted his confession. He said he had admitted to the crime in an attempt to save the woman he loved.
I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was being a hero who was saving his girlfriend's life. I thought I was essentially volunteering to go to prison for roughly 10 years in my own home country of Germany, and that would save Elizabeth from being electrocuted. I loved her.
You're a smart guy. You had to understand there was a risk this was going to backfire on you.
Actually, at the time, I was an 18-year-old, emotionally underdeveloped idiot.
And now, Jens Soring, knight in shining armor defense, would be heard by an American jury. His trial began on June 1st, 1990. The prosecution laid out its case. There was the extra mileage logged on the rental car the weekend of the murder. Type O blood found at the scene that matched Soring's. And then there was the bloody sock print, which prosecutors said was a perfect match to his.
And you pull that out, and it matches, and it fits like a glove.
Prosecutors described the murders as a violent struggle between the Haysams and their attacker. They argued that the injuries seen on Jens' hands and face at the Haysams' funeral were signs of that struggle. But the most dramatic part of the prosecution's case was when its star witness took the stand, the woman Jens loved, Elizabeth Haysam. Elizabeth says her role was to establish an alibi in Washington, while Jens killed her parents in Virginia.
You set up the alibi in the car, right?
We discussed what the alibi would be, and that was for me to go to these various movies to take notes.
Elizabeth described her time in Washington in great detail.
Jens dropped me off at the movie. I went round the corner and I bought a drink and I scored some dope. I got a taxi and I went to the second movie that we had agreed that I would go to.
Jens tried to refute Elizabeth's testimony point by point. And he had a particularly good explanation for that very incriminating diary entry, where Elizabeth suggested that a fingerprint left by Jens on a coffee mug during his interrogation might have linked him directly to the crime scene.
Why would she write something so specific and something so damning?
Specifically to incriminate me. If I did not keep my promise to her to take the blame, that she would have some kind of insurance policy.
When he originally confessed, Jens had described the actual murders in great detail. He says he created that story with the help of the real killer, Elizabeth.
What did Elizabeth tell you happened the night that her parents were murdered?
She really didn't tell me, okay? The way we developed this lie was for me to imagine what I would have done if I had committed this crime. And every time the story didn't fit the facts, she would tell me what I should say instead.
Which sounds absolutely ridiculous to me. It's hard to imagine that if someone has just committed a murder, that they'd sit down with you and that you all would sort of play act through some plausible explanations of what had happened.
That's what we did. That's what we did. Our priority was get the story straight to save her life. And that's what we did.
In the end, Jens Soring needed the jury to believe that he had been manipulated the whole time by the real killer, Elizabeth Haysam.
She wanted you to kill him.
No, she didn't.
Because she couldn't kill him herself.
I think Elizabeth's quite capable of that.
Well, if she could kill him herself, she didn't need you, did she, Jens?
She needed me to be the patsy. She needed me to be the patsy.
The testimony lasted for 11 days, but it took the jury just 4 hours to agree on a verdict. Jens Soring, guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Jens was given 2 life sentences. Now, more than 2 decades later, he continues to proclaim his innocence from behind bars and says new evidence proves his version of the story.
Whom do you blame for your incarceration?
Myself. I had an option to tell the truth when I was... initially, I had an option to call the police on the night that Elizabeth confessed the crime to me. And that's what I should have done.
Represented by attorney Gail Marshall, Jens filed an appeal in 1995.
This was a terrible trial. This was a very unfair trial. I became morally certain that he had not committed the crime.
Most troubling to Marshall, that bloody sock print.
It turns out that there is absolutely no way you can make an identification of somebody from a sock print. And the expert, so-called expert, who testified was an expert in tire prints.
At trial, Yen's lawyer had never challenged the sock print testimony, even though the police report said the size of the print matched a size 5 to 6 man's shoe. And Yen Soering wears a significantly larger size 8.5.
We had one statement from a juror who said, if it hadn't been for the sock print evidence, I would never have voted for conviction.
Yen's appeal was denied. The court didn't believe any new argument proved that the criminal trial had been undermined. Now he's pinning his hopes on recent DNA testing, not in use at the time of the murders, which was done on evidence found at the crime scene more than 2 decades ago.
The police found old biological samples in Department of Forensic Sciences files, tested them, and found out that there were 42 samples from the crime scene, okay? None of which could be linked to me, and 11 of which directly excluded me.
Okay, before you go any further, let me tell you what records also show. That 24 of them, half, couldn't even be processed
Correct.
for DNA, and 7 didn't contain enough information for comparison.
Correct.
So that leaves just 11 viable samples that clear not only you, but Elizabeth.
Right. 11 viable samples is more than twice as many than in most other of these cases.
While the testable samples show no DNA linking either Elizabeth or Yen's to the crime scene, the less sophisticated original testing of blood from these samples did show a blood type match to Yen's.
There were also 5 samples of type O blood found at the scene, which is your blood type.
Correct. And 43%.
They could not be processed for DNA, but you can't dismiss those either.
No, right. That's the interesting thing about this case.
While Elizabeth Haysom appears resigned to spending the rest of her life behind bars, Yen Soering continues to fight for his return to his native Germany. But he knows the odds are against him.
Do you really have faith that you're going to walk out of here someday?
I have absolutely zero faith in the court system. They have bitterly disappointed me, and I have no faith in the court system whatsoever.
For the friends of Derek and Nancy Haysom, Yen Soering, the bitter man who confessed to murder and was later convicted by a jury, got exactly what he deserved.
Do you think Jens will be paroled and be allowed to go back to Germany?
All I can say is I hope not.
You'd be very angry if that happened.
I would be very unhappy, yes. I think a lot of people, the investigators, I think the judge in the case, whom I know, and a lot of other folks would be very unhappy if that occurred, because I think that, you know, justice is being served, in our opinion.
Yen Soering continues to publicly plead his case for parole, but the final decision rests in the hands of the governor of Virginia. I'm Paula Zahn. Join us next time when we're back on the case.